Hello and welcome to Student Affairs Live. I'm your host, Tony Doody, and I'm pleased to be joining you from my professional home at Rutgers University. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live network, and you can tune in to Student Affairs Live along with my brilliant friend and co-host, Heather Shea Gasser, Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our guests, but we can't do that without first giving a shout out to the sponsors that make Student Affairs Live possible. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communication firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. ACPA College Student Educators International is pleased to provide support for Student Affairs Live. One of the many ways that we can be innovative with your professional development. Visit myacpa.org to discover the next way to engage with your own personal and professional development. I want to take a moment to thank Kate Zullo and Robin Janice, who are here in the studio with me today, monitoring the back channel and forwarding to me your best content and questions from the Twitterverse. And finally, I'm very honored to have joined us today four distinguished editors representing different areas and publications within student affairs. Amy Bergeson, Debora Liddell, Elizabeth Beltramini, and Suzanne Price. So I'd like to start off and have each of you briefly describe your current role and what you would consider to be your first published paper, the topic, and the publication. So let's start with Amy.
Okay. I am the co-editor of the NASPA Journal about women in higher education. And we are a journal that publishes scholarship about women in higher education. I think my first published article was about the import of the concept of lay boards of trustees into higher education in Hungary after the fall of the Soviet Union. And it appeared in the international journal Higher Education in about I think it was about 1999.
Wow. Cool. All right, Deb? We got to take you off mute.
Got it. Hi, I'm Deb Liddell. I'm editor of the Journal of College Student Development. We are owned by ACPA, and we are published by Johns Hopkins University Press. My day job is as professor of higher education and student affairs, and I serve as chair of the Educational Policy and Leadership Studies Department at the University of Iowa. My first publication was a peer-reviewed publication in actually the Journal of College Student Development, back when it was called the Journal of College Student Personnel. And my spouse and I published a short practice piece on coping with long-distance relationships. And it's just gotten a ton of hits because I think it was so pragmatic and there weren't a lot of people writing on it. So, yeah, wow, nice to be with you.
That sounds like a future episode. All right, Liz.
I'm Liz Beltramini. I am editor of the Bulletin of the Association of College Unions International, and I was really trying to think back to my first paper, and I went way, way back. In the first grade, I published a book about a mouse through our elementary school. So that was really the first one. More recently, probably in college, was a paper I did on analyzing race in the Year of the Born Jackie Robinson, which is a children's book. And I did that for Indiana University's Afro-American Studies publication.
Very cool. All right, Suzanne.
Hi, I am Suzanne Price, and I am the Director of Residential Learning at Clemson University. And I'm also serve as the editor of the Journal of College and University Student Housing, ACUHO-I. My first publication was a book review in the NODA Journal, probably 2000, 2001, sometime around there.
Very good. So I understand for all of you that editors can be really strict about your word counts. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a little challenge here and ask each of you to use 10 words or less it's like a haiku. No, haiku is longer, right? To describe the publication that you're representing today. Let's go in reverse order. Suzanne, what do you got for us?
All right, I'm with ACUHO-I, but also quickly I'm going to do a plug for the Talking Stick. That's also an ACUHO-I publication. So with the Talking Stick, it is a magazine that provides housing, news, and innovations for practitioners.
Very concise.
ACUHO-I, I counted my words. ACUHO-I, peer-reviewed journal for college and university housing practitioners and scholars.
Okay. And Liz, back to you.
I said, I'm talking about the Bulletin, and I said a resource for college union and student activities scholar practitioners.
Very good. All right, Deb.
JCSD is the leading referee journal publishing evidence about how students grow and develop.
Used every word, right?
I did.
Okay, Amy.
And JAWE, scholarship about women, faculty, staff, and students in higher education.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Now, Amy, I'm going to come back to you and get back to basics here and ask the simple question, why should someone publish?
Well, the simple answer to that, I think, is because they have something to say. So I think that there are lots of different reasons depending what it is you have to say. So obviously, those of us who are in faculty positions have things to say, but we also must publish in order to continue to stay in our roles. But lots of people aren't required to publish as part of their job. And so I think, whether it's an opinion that you have that is important that it gets out there on a blog or in a newsletter, whether it's reports of empirical research that might make a difference in the way we run higher education and the way that we serve students in higher education, whether it's something in between that, even an essay on, an important policy issue. But if you feel like you have something that you want to express and share and add to a conversation that you are passionate about or invested in, then publishing is a really great way to make that contribution.
So I want viewers to understand the range and opportunities that are available for publishing, and even within the publication, the range of options, both for format and length. So again, I'll ask each one of you to share with the audience the kind of content or articles that you're looking for in each of your publications. I got a question from Lauren Semenda, who asked, if articles aren't necessarily academic in nature, is there a place for them to be published? So I'm sure you'll answer that through your each of your responses. Let's start with you, Suzanne.
Well, we have with ACUHO-I, I'll talk primarily about ACUHO-I. We have 2 regular issues. We just moved to 2. We were at 1. That transition happened this past year in the spring and the fall. And those really are more of the research-based, assessment-based, theoretically grounded, refereed type manuscripts, around 5,000 words. Mm-hmm. But we also do a theme issue, a theme manuscript where we solicit people, we ask for people to come up with a topic that was written about 20 years or more ago, 20 years ago or more, and to do an update on that with a new manuscript. So that is something we publish once a year. And then we also have a trends publication. It used to be printed. We've moved the trends issue to a completely digital copy version. And it is, we solicit guest editors and they recruit authors and they decide the topic and do everything for that one. So we have a couple different options, but for your question, I would say the talking stick for us is absolutely a place where a best practice or an idea or questions could be explored that may not be as academic or scholarly in nature.
Very good. All right, Liz.
Yeah, so for several years, ACUI has had the Commons, which has been our blog, and we're in the process of implementing a new content strategy. So we're actually collapsing that publication into the Bulletin, and so the Bulletin will be both an online and print edition. And so really, there are so many opportunities. You can do the research, scholarly features, you can do the literature reviews, but then you could also do a quick how-to piece or a first-person perspective on a hot topic. There are, even just have fun with it. We had a piece just recently that was taking a movie and comparing it to leadership in the profession. So I think depending on your writing style and your interest in delving into a topic or sharing your expertise, there are a lot of different avenues for you to write.
Okay. Deb.
Yeah, we take, at the Journal of College Student Development, Visual Aid, we take 4 kinds of articles, actually. We take the bulk of our articles are research feature articles, and they run about 30 to 32 pages. And we are packing our journals these days, and we have 5 or 6 of those in each issue. In fact, I just got the winter issue yesterday. So we also have 1 international feature, which focuses on higher education settings in other countries, also about 30 pages. We do shorter pieces though too, Tony, and we have a section called Research in Brief, where we invite folks who don't want a traditional, they don't see it, maybe they want to focus maybe more on results than a long lit review and introduction and justification for the study. So it's much more concise. They tend to be 8 to 10 pages long. We'll have 2 or 3 of those in each issue. We also, and this is how I got published for the first time, have a section called On the Campus. And those pieces are 3 to 5 pages, type pages, and it could be a program evaluation or something that focuses on a very concisely and precisely on a particular campus issue. All the time we're focusing though on presenting evidence about something. We also publish book reviews, but our book reviews are always invited. If you're interested in writing a book review, and a lot of junior, I wouldn't say junior, emerging scholars may start out with book reviews, you could contact our book review editor, who's Maureen Wilson at Bowling Green, and send your vita to her and describe your areas of expertise. And so there might be an opportunity for a book review there. We're also interested in work that others want to read primarily. So we want work that's going to be cited, and we want work that's going to help us advance what we know about student development and student success. So we would not publish an opinion piece, presidential address, something like that. We'd leave that to other venues.
Got it. All right, Amy.
So at NJAWE, we also take 4 different kinds of submissions. The sort of traditional report of empirical research. We also do publish essays or opinion pieces, but they need to include citations and whatnot, but, you know, to support the opinion and argument. We have book reviews. They are also invited. So very much like Deb described, you know, if you're interested in writing one, reach out to we have a new book review editor who's starting in March, who is Dolores McNair. And then the last thing, which maybe addresses the question that you received, is that we also publish program descriptions. And what we're really interested in here is descriptions of things that are going on different campuses that are improving the environment for women in higher education. And those are typically 3 to 4 page descriptions of something that you have just implemented. It's great if you have a little bit of assessment data to include in that, but it's not a research report. It can be very much talk about the development of the program, the implementation of it, just describing it, providing some data around that. And those we don't get enough of. We would really like to see more of those. So I would encourage people who aren't necessarily doing research, so to speak, to think about what they might be doing actively on their campuses that they would like to share with our readers. Yeah.
Great. Now, I recognize that this can be different for each publication, and I'll ask for differences in just a moment. But Deb, could you talk us through the process of review? What happens behind the scenes when someone hits send and submits an article?
You want to know how the sausage gets made, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, we use editorial manager software to help us manage about 450 manuscripts a year that get submitted. So it's a rather mammoth job. We find with editorial manager, it allows us to create a clean separation between the folks who are writing and the folks who are reviewing. And that's really important when you're undergoing peer review that is also a blind review. So you submit your article and it's received by our publication manager here, Gwen Archibald, who is a grad assistant doctoral student at the University of Iowa. So Gwen will check for general formatting. She'll check for length. She'll check to make sure that it's not been published somewhere else, maybe a quick Google search on the title, and to make sure that the author cannot be easily identified. And and she also makes sure that the article is masked. So in short, what we don't want to do is we don't want reviewers to know who you are if you're writing for us, and we don't want you to know who the reviewers are. So sometimes it can take a couple of weeks of back and forth before a submission actually gets accepted into our system for those reasons. Then we assign it an action editor based on what kind of article it is. I do the research features, Dafina, that tend to be quantitative in nature. Dafina Lazarus, Stewart does our qualitative features, and then we have two associate editors that do our research and brief, one that does international. And so we send it to the action editor, and every once in a while there's a dual relationship or a conflict of interest. Maybe I receive an article from a former student and I'll assign that to another action editor so that there's just more separation and objectivity there. The editors then are going to do a brief desk review, and about 50% of these are desk rejected. After it is sent to review, we try to match it to 2, sometimes 3 reviewers where there's a good match on classification. That might be content area as well as methodology. So it typically takes 4 to 6 weeks for the reviewers to have their way with an article. They send it back. We focus on detailed and constructive feedback to our authors and really pride ourselves on this being a good developmental and constructive approach to our reviews. Our goal is the goal of our review, I tell our reviewers, is to improve the article. Just improve it. It's my decision to make render a judgment on it, but their role is to help improve the article. Sometimes an article requires 2 or 3 revisions, and then after acceptance and copyright transfer, we send the article to our copy editor who will do the micro edits and the fine tuning, and then the typesetters and the proofs are sent back to the authors. The authors always have the final approval. So if you happen to see a mistake in copy, it's possibly because an author didn't catch something that the typesetter was saying to them. But our time to publication at that point is about 3 to 6 months. Although once an article is fine-tuned and copy edited and clean for publication, we try to get it online as soon as possible so that it can be read by others. So,
wow,
I know it's a lot of moving parts.
So other people, any notable differences that you'd like to share?
I wouldn't say it's really a difference, but I want to just build on what Deb was saying about asking reviewers and editors to help make articles better, improve them. Mm-hmm. So we really talk with our reviewers extensively in their training about developmental reviews. And so whether the article is accepted or not accepted into the journal, we're really interested in nurturing the writer through that process in a way that they leave feeling encouraged rather than discouraged, and and know maybe where there are some options of where their manuscript might be published, even if it's not appropriate for our journal or it's not ready to be accepted to our journal yet. So that's just another piece. And I think my experience with JCSD is that they very much work in that same way as well. And I think that's a really important piece. Not every journal is like that.
Thank you.
I would say that with ACUHO-I, it was just announced yesterday, I think, that we have moved to an online submission system, Scholar One. So we're learning that process, because prior to that, I received emails and had a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, and I had to blind everything and trust settings. And I know everything there is to know about how to work with a Word document now. But I'm excited about this. But one thing, we went through a process of review for what company we would use for our processing for the submissions. And we were very committed to a process that would still allow us to give very detailed feedback and comments, because I just processed one the other day. We give them, my letter with all the broad outlines, but then the actual manuscript, and it's not uncommon that it may have 60 to 75 comments in it. And when I talk to people at conferences, I say, don't be alarmed. That's actually normal.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would just say we're not peer reviewed, and so our process is a lot simpler. If you're interested in writing, contact me. We also often solicit topics for areas that are not covered as often. So there are some folks, for instance, who might be really great experts in the areas of facilities or maintenance, but they are not typically writers. And so regardless, if you have some level of expertise, we can work on the writing part. What we want to do is be a resource for the readers. And so they need that information too. And so when we get a manuscript, we will go back and forth with the author many, many times to help them and encourage them and continue to develop that process. So at times it's a very quick turnaround, and other times we work over the course of several months. It really depends. But like others have said, we really want to make it developmental, educational, help them walk away with a skill that maybe they've improved through this.
So we got a great question from a good colleague, friend, Rachel Luna, who asked, what advice do you have for emerging scholars to get their writing up to par for publishing? I'm glad to hear that it's blind in several submissions, but I can imagine putting my name to something could be intimidating. So how do I work on getting my writing up to par for anyone?
I would say the thing that has helped me the most has been to be in the role of a reviewer, and early in my career to serve on editorial boards. Now, prior to that, what we do with our doctoral students at Iowa is we try to implement some measure of peer review in our classes and for major papers. And so, writing is very personal to most of us because it's an extension of who we are and our values and what we think. And so it can be intimidating to share it with others, but nothing will make you a better writer than opening yourself up to feedback from people that you respect. The more you read, the more you review, the more you'll be able to identify your own shortcomings and bad habits in your own writing. So that would be my advice, Tony.
I would second that, and add just even a formal writing group, a group of friends, colleagues who who are also interested in writing. I think one of the things that it's been really interesting as the editor of ACUHO-I, the number of people who aren't scholars in their full-time role, but who really want to write and who are interested in that, and finding those people and having a group where you can set the time aside to do it. And also this notion of peer review. I mean, just someone you trust and is going to be honest and critical, but also not mean, is really, really helpful to have. It's really important whether writing and scholarship is your full-time gig or something that you're doing to augment the other work that you're doing.
True. Yeah.
I would second the writing group. ACUI has introduced that for some of our members who are interested in writing, so we meet monthly. And it's a mix of people. Some are working on dissertations and just need that little extra push, and then others have been told you need to improve your writing by a supervisor, and so they're working through it. And it's helpful to have a variety of perspectives around that table to critique in that positive way.
I like it. So to the happy nerd on Twitter, I just want you to know I see your question, and we'll get to it in just a moment. But I want to, that's his Twitter handle, no, not making it up. I want to get your tips. Everyone here, we've got a great collection of editors, so I want to hear everyone's top tip for writers. And again, we'll go around the virtual reality thing here, and we'll start with, let's start with Amy. Your top tip.
Write about something that you are passionate about. It's really hard to put the time and energy into writing something that you feel blah about. So pick something that's interesting, and especially that you think might make a difference in a way that you want to make a difference, and write about that.
Very good. Deb.
Well, I'd say from a referee journal perspective that aside from just designing a good study, if you've got empirical evidence you're presenting, that's of course a given. But I would say know and understand and use the literature from the journal that you're trying to get into. It's really frustrating from an editorial perspective. Amy's laughing. To read submissions where they clearly don't understand the mission of the journal and the nature of the literature that we're trying to advance. So,
Okay, Liz.
I would say that a lot of writers will start out with an outline, and that is a completely valid approach to writing. But I would also share that it's valid to just write down all the questions you think your writer might have, and then write, and don't worry about length, and don't self-edit as you go along. Just get it on the paper, and then you can go back and edit and critique and wordsmith. But don't spend your time during the writing process. Just get it down on paper.
Okay.
Suzanne.
I would say talk to colleagues and ask if they care about your topic. I know that with studies, sometimes we can get very specific and very narrow in scope. As an editor, I have to think about our readers. And if it's too narrow or just a little outside of our field, I'm going to say no. But I think it's important. Just ask colleagues and trusted friends and colleagues, would you be interested in reading about this?
It's interesting. So we're going to move on to the question of topics, and Amy, if you could address this one. It was a Happy Nerds question. They asked, do any of the editors have suggestions on how to find topics that are likely to be published? Now, I know you say find something that's passionate, but I've got a lot of things that I'm passionate about. Are there topics or approaches to topics that might be better suited to different publications? And are there hot topics that you're looking for that there seems to be an absence of submissions?
Well, I think Deb's advice to really look at the journal that you want to publish in and see what they're publishing, right? So that if you are looking to publish, in any of the journals represented here, understand what's going on in those journals. And often people will write in their research articles, what does somebody need to do next, right? What's the next step to understanding this thing better, to solving this problem more successfully? So, paying attention to what people call for in their research as far as what should happen in the future is one way to do that. I think it's also completely appropriate, at least in my mind, other editors might not agree with this, to contact the editor and say, I am interested in publishing my paper on, women's experiences of activism on college campuses in your journal. Is that something you'd be interested in? Provide a little bit of background about what it is you're thinking about, writing about, or studying, and then see if that's something that a journal editor would be interested in having in their journal. We have a board meeting every year where we try to generate a list of topics that we are interested in finding authors who want to write about. What have we not talked about enough? I know one right now that is very hot is this idea of student activism. What are students doing on our campuses? What's the impact of the political environment on different groups of students on our campuses? And I think that's a really interesting field that's going to be wide open for people to start thinking about, because you can't isolate students from what's going on everywhere else. But I think it's a matter of really trying to think about what fits with the journal or the place that you want to publish, or if you've already got something going, figuring out which place to publish it is going to be the best fit. It's definitely, fit is a big deal. Does that kind of get at what you're...
Yeah, anyone have anything to add to that?
I would also say, if you're a practitioner, I guess this is more for the practitioners, think about what's keeping you up at night or what's keeping your colleagues up at night. As editors, we want our publications to be relevant. And so if you're talking about it, it's likely that others are talking about it, and there's a story idea there. Yeah.
Think about at your conferences, what are the hot topics? What are the sessions that are packed, standing room only? And, for us in housing, certainly the Affordable Care Act and tracking hours, things that have happened, animals on campus. A lot of people have animals for different reasons, but how is that impacting the student experience, the residential experience? And Title IX, I think there have been significant issues in our field that as practitioners, we're just now really grasping and understanding how this influences our work, but people need to start doing the research and now writing about it.
So Suzanne, this question for you is about the voice, finding your right voice when you're writing either for an academic audience, say in a journal, versus more practitioner-based audience, say in the Talking Stick or the Bulletin. What are some tips? How do you adjust? How does your style change when you're submitting to different content to different journals or newsletters?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, the preparation is what's been mentioned. Review the publication. Understand what's in each kind of publication. If you have a very in-depth research piece, then it's probably more appropriate for a referee journal. If you have more of an opinion piece for an amazing new best practice or comparison of 2 or 3 different programs, then that's going to be more practitioner-based. A different kind, but recognizing that, for us, we do have both with the Talking Stick and the journal. And I try to think about this kind of as the square and the rectangle, okay? I think that the research piece, what we would accept for ACUHO-I is really the square. It can also be the rectangle. With some adaptation, it could be appropriate for the Talking Stick. However, because of the requirements that we have for a peer-reviewed referee journal and our requirements and length and everything else, I don't know that a Talking Stick article would be appropriate ever for the journal. But that's okay. Both, it's not a value. They're both very important for the work that we do. And just recognize and own that is okay. And not feel, less than if somebody says, this might be appropriate, because I've done that to authors. This is a great topic, but given what you presented, I think it would be more appropriate in a practitioner magazine style publication. that has a lot of readership. So there should be no shame, and people should really value all of them equally.
So Liz, this next question for you, we know in student affairs we place a great deal, or at least we should be placing a great deal of value on assessment. So with that in mind, how do you actually know people are reading your publication, and how do you assess the quality and the reader satisfaction?
Well, each publication is probably a little bit different. For ACUI, we certainly have the readership studies and then also major member value surveys, so our needs assessments, our satisfaction surveys, those sorts of things that ask about the bulletin in them and what sort of value we're tracking there. But then we also look at different metrics on a regular basis. So are people ordering extra copies? Are they sharing or retweeting on social media? Are our clicks and open rates for our e-communications about the bulletin increasing? Those sorts of things. So to a certain extent, there's no idea what that person's immediate reaction is when they have the physical copy in their hands, or how many times they talked about it with their colleague that day. But we try to do these assessments to give us a little bit more of a lens into what our readers are thinking.
Deb, this next question for you. How do we ensure that all voices and identities are adequately represented in publications?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tony. We try to ensure diversity in terms of persons and identities, perspectives, and methodologies on our editorial board. Where if I have a submission that I can't find an appropriate reviewer for, I'll go outside our board in a heartbeat and just, invite someone to be an occasional reviewer for us, whether it's a methodology I can't quite match on, or whether it's content. And when you're managing a masked review process, you're always going to be living with the tension between representation and anonymity. So we may not live in perfect harmony with those two poles, but it's something that we think about a lot.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I would add to that, we really try to have a diverse board of reviewers, the people who are looking at those articles. And so if there are people who are watching or listening who are really interested in expanding the diversity and feel like their voices aren't represented in the publications, one way to sort of begin to remedy that is to volunteer to be on these boards, to apply for that and make clear what you're interested in terms of what your expertise is and the type of research or topics that you're interested in, and then begin to recruit others to start submitting that work too. I mean, I think this also has to come from the journals themselves, but also from the readers who want to see the change in what's happening in the journals. They're your journals, they're not ours. They belong to the people who read them.
Suzanne, speaking of the boards, are there politics on these editorial boards? I can imagine there might be some competing agendas, competing priorities, in fact.
Well, I'm in my third year as editor. Before that, I was a reviewer for ACUHO-I. And I can honestly say that so far, no. I have a great board. I have associate editors, and they each have review teams. And I have 3 associate editors. Yes. But they, we have calls quarterly. We discuss any decisions that need to be made. We make them together. Now, just because there may not be some competing political agendas, it's still stressful. This is a volunteer position for all of us. The deadlines, response issues, workloads. You know, I try to make sure I'm not overloading any one team or associate editor. But, you know, do I have to sometimes say, hey, I was supposed to get this back on this date. Where are you? Yeah, but people are great and the work happens. But fundamentally, I think that we all are in philosophical agreement on the purpose of our journal and the work that we want to see in the publication.
Anyone else want to talk about politics? No. Okay. So I asked this question, this is for anyone. I asked this question to Susan Jones last year on the live stage in Montreal at the contested issues debates that we did. And I said, with what seems like an avalanche of research over the last few decades, how are practitioners supposed to distinguish the relevant and cutting edge from the redundant and inconsequential? So, anyone have a response to that?
I'll jump in. Read the implications. If it's an empirical study, read the implications, because I think a good editor will push a writer to say, why should anyone care about your results? Tell us how to make this work. I would say discuss the work that's coming out. I would say set up some reading groups in your workplace and take an article or two and talk about how you might integrate this. Go to conference sessions where research is presented and get into some dialogue with other folks who are there about how you might advance your own practice by using this evidence. Those would be some suggestions I had.
Great.
That's what I had the same thing. Look at the discussion and implications section of the piece, or if it's not really, if it's more of a best practices piece or something like that, recommendations, you know, something like that at the end where the person says, here's what is new and different here and what you can do with it. And then if it looks like it's going to be helpful, you could go back and read the whole thing.
So Liz, will there ever, you said you use some analytics and to assess readership and quality. Will there ever be a time when we stop printing paper books, magazines, and journals? Now, how do you think publishing might evolve over the next decade?
Over the next decade? Well, as we know, it's evolved quite a bit over the past decade, so I think that trajectory is going to continue. For books, magazines, and journals, I'll kind of take those individually. I think that books, there will always be some sort of paper book, at least over the next 10 years. Magazines and journals, there will probably be fewer printed. Just thinking about the capabilities of what's available online. I think convergence is going to continue. We already have online-only journals. We already have some video journals, at least in other disciplines. And then thinking about our magazines, looking to the corporate arena. Magazines like trade publications, they do their own events and they do their own videos and podcasts and all sorts of things. So I think that what we think of as a publication is going to be less about the paper and more about what sort of resource it serves for its audience.
All right, anyone else?
I will say that when we decided to put our theme issue to move from print to digital only, that was several conversations, because there is still a perception about the printed journal, and so making that move was a difficult one, but it was, for us, it wasn't. It's sure it saves some money and resources, but it really was about timeliness and being able to get information out more quickly. But it was a difficult decision for us because of the scholarly process.
Cool. All right, so we are going to bring back an audience favorite. We're going to bring back our lightning speed round and learn a little bit more about each one of you here. So we're going to go quickly around the horn, and I'm going to ask you a question, and we'll go in order, and we'll do it as rapidly as we can. Are we ready? You got to take your mutes off. All right, here we go. We'll go Amy, Deb, Liz, and Suzanne, and we'll go back around. All right, so Amy, favorite website?
Powells.com.
Okay, Deb?
Google Scholar.
Liz?
TED.
Suzanne?
CNN.
CNN, all right. All right, back to you, Amy. Favorite online resource?
Google Scholar.
Deb?
Purdue Online Writing Lab.
Okay, Liz?
AP Style Editor.
Suzanne?
Google Scholar.
All right. Back to you, Amy. Favorite app?
Yelp.
Okay, Deb?
Pass.
Pass. No app. You don't have a smartphone, right?
Amazon Music.
Oh, okay. Suzanne?
Apple Music.
Okay. Amy, favorite higher education author?
Okay, my favorite education author is Nell Noddings. My favorite higher education author right now, today, is Z. Nicolazzo. I'm reading his new book, their new book, Trans in College, and it's awesome.
Excellent. All right, Deb.
Susan Jones.
Okay, she'll be happy to hear that. Liz?
I have to go with Porter Butts.
Okay. Suzanne?
Susan Comovies.
She'll also be happy to hear it. All right, Amy, favorite theory?
Thriving in College, Laurie Schreiner.
Okay, Deb?
An Ethic of Care, Carol Gilligan.
Liz?
Anchor Theory, Daniel Kahneman.
Okay, Suzanne?
Linda Tarr Whalen's 30% rule for women.
Wow, I got some research to do on Google Scholar. All right, back to you, Amy. Favorite non-education magazine or newspaper?
New York Times.
All right, Deb?
New York Times.
Liz?
Smithsonian Magazine.
Outlier. Suzanne?
Pass.
Okay. Amy, back to you. Favorite social network?
My favorite, Facebook.
Okay. Deb?
Facebook, though I'd like it better if my daughter would friend me.
Liz?
Pinterest.
And Suzanne?
Facebook.
Got it. Deb, don't feel bad. I'm not Facebook friends with my wife. All right. What do we got here? Least favorite social network? Amy?
Twitter, because I just can't get under 140 characters.
That's a tough challenge for an editor.
A good editor can help you with that.
Yeah.
All right, Deb.
Yik yak.
Yeah, me too. All right, Liz.
Instagram.
Okay. And Suzanne.
Yik yak.
Yeah. All right. Amy, favorite and least favorite font?
Cambria is my favorite, and I don't really have a least favorite.
Okay. Deb?
Love Garamond. I think it's quite elegant. I don't have a least favorite.
Okay. Liz?
Favorite is probably Webdings or Font Awesome. And my least favorite is Chiller.
Chiller. Gonna look that one up too. All right, Suzanne.
Favorite is Arial. I used it in college and love it. Least favorite, I don't really have one, but I've asked some millennial colleagues and they are very passionate about hating Comic Sans. I mean, they all said that. It was shocking.
All right, and last speed round question. Amy, APA, MLA, Chicago, or some other style for citation?
Go APA.
All right. Deb, I already know because Purdue was your favorite website.
ABA.
Yeah, got that memorized. All right, Liz.
APA.
And Suzanne.
APA.
All right. So we're nearing the end of our time here, and I'd like to finish out by asking each of you to share a few resources, websites, books, conferences, newsletter, associations that maybe other than your own, with the audience that can help them continue to learn about and explore some of the topics covered during today's episode. So let's go reverse order. Suzanne, what do you got for us?
Well, first I'd like to say your colleagues, especially if you're a practitioner, to consider talking to faculty. And if you're faculty and you may be looking for a topic or trying to decide some research or a pathway, talk to some practitioners. So I think there's an opportunity there just among colleagues.
Okay. Liz.
So I would second that and say writers groups are fantastic. Unstuck is a great tool, and then a few books on Writing Well by William Zinsser, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, A Writer's Reference by Diana Hacker, and Woe Is I by Patricia O'Connor.
Tell me for a moment about Unstuck. What does it do?
Well, it can help you in anything because it's really about getting over a hurdle. So it has different kinds of mind mapping exercises that you can try to approach a problem differently. And then it has some strategies that you can use or processes to just think through what your problem is and try to come up with a solution.
Excellent. All right, Deb.
Yeah, well, in terms of writing tools, I love, I've got a good collection because we're here at the University of Iowa, home of the Writers Workshop. Elements of Style is just a fantastic resource for mastering the English language. Things like a Word Watcher's Handbook, A Day in the Life of the English Language, and Between You and Me, Confessions of a Comma Queen. I love this book. But other resources aside from just the writing tools, I'd say I love the ACPA products that are put out. We've started doing videos, short author videos between Patrick Love. This is a project of the Senior Scholars Group through ACPA. So Patrick's been doing some short interviews with people who are writing for the journal and talking about implications and having some dialogue with between the researcher and the practitioner, which I love. And the ACPA conference, I think, is a very resource-rich place to talk about and learn more about research.
Very good. Amy?
So I'm going to add to Deb. I had both the NASPA and ACPA organizations as great resources for authors, for people who are interested in a variety of topics, different kinds of publications that can really help them learn more. The conferences, both really awesome organizations. I also thought, the whole question about topics, staying on top of reading the Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Education, those kinds of things are great ways also to remember what's going on and what do we need, what are the conversations that I want to contribute to. In terms of writing, I have looked a lot at the work of Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. She has this great idea of this thing called morning pages that you write when you first wake up in the morning, when your brain is clear. So before you read your email or check your social media site, to just sit up and start writing whatever comes to your mind. And especially if you're trying to work through a particular topic, whether it's even a problem at work or you're just trying to come up with something to write about, this is when your brain is the most fresh and the most ready to think about the important kinds of thinking that you need to do. And so just to journal for 20 minutes every day, doing these morning pages is a really great tool. When I'm advising doctoral students on their dissertations, I encourage every one of them to do morning pages, write every single day something. It doesn't have to be sit down at the computer and write part of your dissertation, but to be thinking about it and writing about it every day. So if you're trying to pursue a topic and think about what you want to write, that's a great way to do that.
So I just want to address that for a moment. I want to clarify, at least for myself, and I think this probably applies to a lot of folks, there are probably the mere milliseconds between the time I wake up and the time I check my phone. So I'm going to have to work on extending that. Right?
It's hard. I'm lying in bed in the dark with the cat, complaining about not getting fed soon enough, reading my email. But it's definitely, that is the time of day when your mind is the clearest. The minute you open that email, the clutter starts. And so if you really want to think about something and write about it, that's the time to start.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you today. you brought up Patrick Love. I used to actually present with Patrick Love across the country, do a lot of presentations, and I had another colleague, Laura Pasquini, tell me that presentations were for suckers and that writing was where it was at. And I think you've all inspired me to get on and submit and try go back to writing again. So I really appreciate all your insights, your wisdom. We had a great viewership today, so lots of people interested in this topic. I hope it results in a spike in submissions on a wide variety of topics. Heather Shea Gasser will be back next month, Wednesday, February 8th, with an episode on dismantling racism with author Kathy Aubert. And I'll be back on February 15th with Corey Owen, David Jones, Matt Brown, and Anne-Marie Klotz to talk about leadership and management lessons not taught through books. You can receive reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can also browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to our iTunes podcast. I'm Tony Doody. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you make it a great week, and I look forward to seeing you soon.